we're here today. We met up and we were checking out my SMR 510 Husqvarna. It's a 2007 model with a carburetor. It's got the Keihin FCR41 on it. It's 500 cc, 501, even though it says it's a 510. And over here we've got a DRZ400. If you want a supermoto, you've got this and you've got this, and then you've got way expensive bikes. You know, you got the WR450s, you got your FS570s, your Husqvarnas, your KTMs, and those are like insanely expensive, double the price of these things. So if you want a 400 to 500 cc supermoto, like this is what you're looking at in Taiwan, right? For a reasonable price. Can you tell us about what kind of modifications you've done to it?
Currently, I just modified the exhaust. So this is titanium Yoshimura, the full set. It's not just it's also the front end. For power-wise, I think that's it. Of course, everyone will do the K&N air filter swap, okay. And for the I think that's pretty much it. I don't think actually I didn't really do much about it, but in the future I'm going to put the carburetor also from the Yoshimura, because currently the stock model, the dual purpose model, use BSR 36. Okay, and from the crank it's like 40 horsepower, 4.0 kilogram meter of torque. On the wheel it's about 33 something. Okay.
So this is basically a stock DRZ400, right? And this one is basically stock as well. I've changed the headlight and the tail light because honestly, the stock units, when I pulled the brake at night, the rear halogen would pull so much from the headlight that I couldn't see where I was going. It's absolutely dangerous. I have to change it for inspections, of course, which is annoying. But you know, power-wise, I'm super happy with this, so I haven't really tried to make it faster. I had aftermarket cans on there, slip-ons, but my bags here sort of broke them off, to be honest with you. And so I just went with the stock unit. I think it's got a catalytic converter in it because it's hot as heck, you know. So that's what we're dealing with. So we traded, and I've ridden a couple of DRZs before, but to be honest, it's been a while, and I was surprised at how smooth this was. I guess both engines have balancer shafts in them, and they're you know, this is a little bit more raw. But they're both there's more vibration in this, but they're both fairly smooth, to be honest. If you're talking about a single compared to other singles, right? They're pretty smooth. What were your thoughts engine-wise?
Engine-wise, well, then of course I need to adjust my riding style to a more powerful model, especially in a lot of high turns. And I do feel that you need to be very careful with the throttle. You can't just crank it out. Okay, and I think it's also one thing is also because 510 is a longer bike. Okay, so at the time we went to this place, we actually made a very very sharp hairpins. And then I said, okay. I couldn't use my original habit to maneuver it. Yeah, but I mean, thanks to Michael, that I have a chance to ride a proper race supermoto thing.
Engine-wise, there's a big power difference. It's sort of soft on the bottom, and then it hits hard. It gives you that mid-range kick, and it's probably got 30% more power than this bike. You definitely notice it.
Way more heavier on the highway.
I've got this thing geared really short too, and then because the stock gearing is a 1442, and I'm running a 1344.
Wow! So this.
So we're talking like probably 8% shorter, right? The gearbox on this is really close ratio So you're
I
just
see.
popping through those
Yeah,
gears.
yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
this, it's more wide ratio.
Yeah.
And honestly, on the street, this works. This gearbox works a lot better.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I think mine is 14 versus 41.
Yeah.
I think it's 41. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's 41. So, but how many speed do you have?
I have 6 gears.
Yeah,
in there.
yeah, and DRZ is.
Yeah, but there's 6
famous
close
for five.
ratios
Yeah.
that are just jammed together.
Yeah.
And you weren't able to take it up on higher speeds, but you know, by around 100, 120, the engine's about the top of what you want to comfortably do. You could go 150 on it, but I mean, by then the engine is absolutely screaming, and and you know, singles don't last very long when you scream them like crazy, right? Yeah, with the stock gearing, you've got more top end, definitely, but it's still short. It's still really short. Like cruising speed wise, like what would you see on this?
And it's a yellow plate, so you can just go on the highway and just crank it.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a comfortable sense, then it's always about the 100.
Yeah.
Okay, but you don't really want to do 100 because it makes the time longer, and you always want to ride it faster because it has really firm seats.
Yeah.
It is also one thing that the seat comfort is amazing. It's really soft, really comfortable. I can imagine that if I could do this on those Taiwan to Taipei run, it would be so comfortable. So with this, you always need to climb the bike stronger. So in order to take the stress out of your bottom. So, and you know, if you ride this for maybe like 1 hour, so that means from Taiwan to Hsinchu, you start to, okay, I need to probably just put my weight on one part of it.
Yeah. The seat concept seat makes a big difference. Like I can do, you know, 3-4 hours before I start feeling some discomfort and things like that. And I noticed that the stock seat's pretty hard. It's pretty narrow. Speaking of seats, the seat height is quite a bit lower on this, and the pegs are up. So if you're a shorter person, you know, you're kind of like this. Whereas on this, you're more stretched out. And the bars feel lower on this. The weight's more over the front. You feel like you're right on over the front. And where this, you're more upright, and the weight feels back. More.
I think there's something more Japanese because when I had my XR250, so I remember that when we ride side by side and when it hits the traffic light, then you can see that both of us are sitting like much lower at the back. But I think this kind of design is more amateur friendly because I mean, at the time you're riding on and off road and doing all those steep hills, if you have more support from the front end, you don't really dive in and feel like you're going to be toppled over by the bike.
So I have modified these springs to fit my weight, and they're a bit lighter. And he noticed that this kind of dives more in the front, and I think it also has to do with how it carries its weight, you know, on the front.
But how about the rear spring?
The rear is stock. There's a lot of preload adjustment that you have in it, and I was able to get the rear spring to my spec. Whereas the front, there's no preload on it, so you just have to change the spring.
Like I'm like 40 kilograms heavier than you, so probably it's because of that I feel more dive at the front. This to be honest, But I think it works much better after you change the front wheel into the 21-inch, so you could then it will automatically pick the front up, and then everything will be balanced. Well, I guess I'm just used to this, but also when the first time I hopped on this, I just loved the way that it felt, the way that it turned. I really love having the 17 because the way the front is low and you've got your weight right on it, and when you dip it in, you know, you can drag the brake in right into the turn, and it feels so good on the front tire, you know. Whereas, I mean, I haven't ridden this a bunch, but I feel like this is a little bit more raked out. You're farther away from the tire, but it still turns really good. The suspension is controlled, it's smooth, it absorbs the bumps. If you're looking for a supermoto to just hammer out the roads, this is fantastic, honestly. Well, I mean, it's it's probably something relating to the bike or the car manufacturing theory or concept of Suzuki.
Yeah.
Okay, for the Suzuki product, it has one particular feature. Okay, the price is actually cheap,
Yeah.
and it pretty much put on probably the best thing you can find on the market. Okay, like for example, if you want to buy this front fork like brand new, it will cost you around $3,000.
Wow.
Brand new, okay,
Yeah.
and then they use the Excel rims.
Yeah.
You can see that the spoke is really thick,
Uh-huh.
and everything is built durably.
Yeah.
And also, it's not just the water cool, and then you store the oil in the front,
In the frame.
In the frame. Okay,
Yeah.
so in a way, your bike is always receiving wind at the time you're riding it.
Yeah.
And also for the rear shock, this full-on adjustable. And even for the compression, there is high speed and low speed.
Yeah.
So you don't really get that a lot from the stock model.
Definitely.
Okay.
This has got a Marzocchi front fork
yeah.
in it, 50 millimeters. So
Okay.
it seems like it's a
49.
little bigger. Yeah,
Yeah.
almost the same,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. I'm not sure off the top of my head the travel. This looks like it has more travel in the front suspension. But I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up.
One of the problems for DRZ is the front fork. Okay, the outer tube. You need to be really careful with it. Okay, actually, this is my second set.
Okay.
My previous set just had a lot of dents on top of it,
Yeah.
and then it slowly eroded in because of the humid weather, and it pretty much destroyed the whole appearance of it.
The Suzuki comes stock with a 2-pot Nissan front brake caliper, and the SMR 510 gets a Brembo 4-piston unit that's a little bit bigger disc on it, and that's night and day difference between the two brakes. The DRZ has a cable actuated clutch, and the SMR 510 has a hydraulic Magura unit like you'd find on a KTM. The hydraulic units have a lighter, smoother pull and more control. You can use one finger on them longer, and if they do start to leak down, you have some time to get out of the woods. Whereas when a clutch cable breaks, you have no warning on that. The Suzuki tends to be more durable. Parts are cheap. They're plentiful.
Japanese.
I noticed. Yeah, I noticed you have 72,000 kilometers on it.
Yeah,
Right?
A lot of miles on top of it.
Has it ever been rebuilt?
No. Yeah, but when I got this bike, this one's actually a 05 model, and I bought it in 08. And when I got the bike, it's already been ridden for 8,000 kilometers. And I could sense that it has been modified before.
Yeah.
Okay, because one of the most popular mods for the engine of the DRZ is they cut off the intake inlet.
Yeah.
They make it. They call it 3 times 3.
Yeah.
3 miles. So they make it, and but that was weird because the previous owner they put the stock exhaust back on. And I bought it from Taipei, and I couldn't even reach Hsinchu, and I need to switch to the reserve. It just drinks all the fuels. But then again, I was pretty happy because I just jumped from the 250 on top of 400. Then you just crank it.
Yeah.
And then I just know this is not the range I want, especially when you're going to hit the trail.
Yeah.
You want to come out safely, or you don't want to carry more fuel.
Yeah.
So I sort of just use another plastic plate and then to shrink the size all the way to the original one. Yeah. So yeah.
How many kilometers do you usually get on a tank?
Well, it has a fuel tank of 9 liters, and usually I need to switch to reserve about 140. So you can pretty much get 1 liter for 20 kilometers.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know because when I had this bike, it has a little bit of oil consumption problem, that means that usually I change the oil like every 2,000 kilometers. It's actually a much shorter range than the original factory suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I probably need to add more oil in it, like after 1,500. It's probably because at that time the oil itself is not really that fresh, so it couldn't really hold itself. So a lot of them will be washed out. But then you can discover it at the rear of my place. It's really black.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually many mechanics are saying that it's actually
you're running a bit rich.
The piston ring must have been some crack on top of it. So that's why you also burn out a lot of oil. So
okay. Yeah. So I mean that's amazing for a single to go 70,000 kilometers with no engine rebuild.
Yeah.
You know, that's fantastic.
But I mean, 510 is a different story. It's a race bike.
Yeah. This is this is a race engine, and they recommend tearing the engine down every 10,000 kilometers.
Oh, okay.
If you're doing it on the road, if you're riding on the road, you usually replace the piston rings, gaskets, things of that nature, and then you just have to check the other parts. Usually your valves will last a lot longer. It's got titanium valves, and when you price titanium valves, they're absolutely astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
It's insane. Everything for this bike is going to be like probably 3 times as expensive as this bike.
Yeah.
And you have to do a lot of maintenance on it. But I mean that's the price you pay for the performance that you get.
Yeah.
You know, you've got probably 30% more power in this bike. It's lighter and more agile, and so that's what it is. I'm not sure how this one would do if you're riding fast off road. Like I know that this bike like performs even with a 17 on the front when you're going off jumps and things like that. It handles really well. And because it's a thoroughbred, it's a race bike.
Yeah.
And so whether you do a lot of kilometers, if you do a lot of kilometers, definitely you would probably look at this one. If you don't do that many kilometers, if you like high performance, then you might look in this direction. I think they're pretty good bikes as long as you keep up with the maintenance and you always stay with it. Like I said, this one also has a carburetor. In the next year, in 2008, they had fuel injection, which can be less trouble, but sometimes the fuel pumps go out. Sometimes they have leaks where the fuel pump is in the tank. Sometimes it'll leak fuel, and so that's just another thing that you kind of gotta look at. You kind of gotta worry with if you want fuel injection on that. Honestly, I get tired of tuning the carb sometimes. So, it is what it is. This bike has been made for, 14 years?
Yeah. Suzuki is still making them new.
Yeah, you can still buy them just like this.
Yeah, so
they didn't even change them
at all. Not at all. Yeah, and then they sell them. I think it's more to the Canadian or American side. If you just go get onto the Suzuki websites and you can still see the media was still testing this motorcycle. Yeah, so
they still make parts for them. So, they're still going to support them. You don't have to worry about that, which is nice.
Yeah. So and also I think currently why the price of Suzuki can hold for such a long time. When I bought it, it's like $215,000.
Yeah.
And for now, you can sell these around 180, 190. So you actually lost just like 10%.
Yeah.
And
because they're not
15
sold.
Years.
Yeah, they're not sold here in Taiwan anymore.
That's the one of them.
And there aren't many supermoto options. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've compared these pretty well.
Yeah.
So if you have any more questions, if you want to know more than what we've talked about, comment below, like and subscribe, and we'll try and keep bringing more comparisons for you and your viewing pleasure.